This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome you guys back to another episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by GSMC Podcast Network. My name is Chris Blades, and before I get started here today, I want to make sure I take the time to remind you guys, as always, if you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you never miss an episode. Make sure you're always on top when we drop our latest stuff. Also, if you could please as well, wherever you listen to your podcast, give us a 5-star rating, write a nice review. It'd be very appreciated, very helpful. Allow us to see what you guys like, what you guys dislike, the ways we can improve, all that fun stuff. And also, if you're on social media, we're on social media, so you can find us there. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We can talk, we can chat, we can debate, we can discuss. And the discussion around, or about, whatever you want to call it, the East seed in the West, is beginning to heat up. Or, I mean, it was already, as we talked about, kind of pre-bubble storylines. That was one of the things I was keeping my eye on, because I mean, that's the part of the reason why we are even at this point with the bubble, is the fact that they were trying to get, I mean, they can say, they're never really going to state out plainly like, oh, we wanted to get Zion to the playoffs. Like, that's not what they're going to say. But, I mean, for all intents and purposes, that's like basically what the bubble was designed for. I mean, well, the bubble was designed for safety, but like in terms of bringing the extra teams back, it was so Zion had a chance. They could get 8 more games out of him and potentially get him in the playoffs. And then they got the first round matchup with the Lakers. I mean, the storylines write themselves. Anthony Davis was traded. Like, I mean, if you guys follow basketball, you know the deal. So yeah, that was already going to be interesting in terms of that just how it was all going to play out. So many teams so close in terms of the standings, and it continues to remain interesting. As I've talked about over the last couple episodes, the bubble ball, the Disney Invitational, whatever you want to call it, is working so far. A lot of the games, granted, you're mainly playing, you mainly have other playoff caliber teams, so that makes sense. You don't have, like I said, you don't have the Hawks, you don't have the Knicks, you don't have the Warriors, no KD, no KD, obviously no KD, no Clay, no Steph. Like, you don't have a whole lot of bad teams in the bubble. So, you don't run the risk of being caught out there with a lot of bad matchups. I mean, granted, there have still been some blowouts in this, but at the same time, they're very few and far between. They don't happen nearly as often, which is, again, because of the fact that there are a lot less bad teams. So with that, like I said, a lot of the primetime games have been good. A lot of the just NBA TV League Pass games have been good, and that's again been a plus. But yeah, I mean, all those teams down there and then trying to fight for the 8 seed are doing well. I mean, just I don't know if you guys watched, but if you did, the Blazers played the Rockets here Tuesday night. They finished up, they were able to win. Melo hit him with the dagger, with the 3 to the dome after he made it. Shout out Melo. It's a shame that he was out of the NBA for so long, but at least he's been able to show that, again, he wasn't, if you're looking at the stats, were his stats exemplary? No, not at all. He shot, I think it was like 5 for 14, only had 14 points, or 15 points, excuse me. 11 rebounds, though, so that's very helpful. But then he had like I said, he had the big 3, the dagger to kind of seal the game for the Blazers, and they were able to beat the Rockets in a game they, again, kind of needed to win, because when you look at the standings out west, there are, 3 teams? No, 5, all 5 of the teams that they added to the bubble are within 2 games of each other. And all those teams are at most, or within 3.5 games at the worst, and that's the Kings. of the Grizzlies, who we just found out earlier Tuesday lost Jaren Jackson Jr. to a torn meniscus, so he's done. So I'm not going to say like they're done, but I mean they're probably done. They were already kind of struggling in the bubble as it was. I believe they haven't won a game. They're currently 0-3. Though I think they could have won that first Blazers game. They kind of just jagged it at the end. But yeah, lost to the Spurs, lost to the Pelicans, which it was a game, as we talked about on Monday's episode, was important for the Pelicans. So that was, again, it's not a must-win 2 games into the bubble, but if you wanted to kind of keep pace with the other teams for that 8 seed, this is the game you needed to win. And they did. And the Grizzlies' schedule does not get any easier. They play the Jazz, who have been a little shaky, but I mean, that's a game they could easily lose. And then play the Thunder, another game they could lose, especially with no Jaren Jackson. Then they finish off with the Raptors, Celtics, Bucks, arguably the 3 best teams in the East. I mean, there's a legitimate chance the Grizzlies don't win a game. Now, I think they could probably take one of the games against the Thunder or the Jazz. And I also think, depending on if the Bucks, as we saw today, when they lost to the Nets, which we'll get to in the next segment. But it depends on how serious these teams are going to take it. Because, like, the Lakers, for example, they showed up the 1 seed on Monday. I believe it was Monday. Yeah, it was Monday when they beat the Jazz. They showed up the 1 seed. So, like again, it'll be interesting to see because they have a back-to-back Wednesday, Thursday. They'll play the Thunder and then they play the Rockets. It'll be interesting to see if they rest any guys during those games. Or just, like, again, not even rest, but just, like, play people less minutes. Because at this point, you're just playing just to stay fresh. You're not playing because you need to win these games. You could lose every game and still be the 1 seed. It doesn't really matter for you. Though, in the games you do try, that could affect seeding in other standpoints. Like, say they don't take the Thunder as serious, and then they take the Rockets serious, or vice versa. That could affect seeding, depending on if they win or lose those games. Again, not for them, but for everybody else in the West. So that'll be interesting to see. So yeah, the Grizzlies are in a rough spot. The Blazers again got a much needed win to keep the Spurs off their back because they're only a half game up on the Spurs for that 9 seed. Then you got the Grizzlies, who are half game back of the Spurs. I mean, not the Grizzlies, the Pelicans, who are half game back of the Spurs. Then you got the Suns, who are half game back of the Pelicans. So, like I said, all those teams are within 2 games. The Suns are, I guess, them and the Pacers, I believe, are the only teams to be undefeated in the bubble so far. Well, maybe hold on, I think the Raptors haven't lost a game either. So, let me double check that. Though they've only played 2. Yeah, they've only played 2 games. I mean, they should be the Magic, but they've only played 2 games. So, I guess those are the first 2 teams of 3-0, if I remember correctly. I know the Thunder, the Suns are 3-0, and then the Pacers, led by T.J. Warren, who again we'll get to in a second, are 3-0. They've beaten the Sixers, Wizards, and now the Magic, and then they play the Suns. So that'll be, as crazy as that is, that'll actually be an interesting game Thursday to see who continues on their unbeaten streak. Though, again, the Pacers have the Lakers, Heat twice, and Rockets in the last 4 games, so are they going to go undefeated? Probably not, but, I mean, hey, it's important to get a good start in these early bubble games, again, to build yourself some cushion in case, again, you have a little bit of a slide. But, I'm saying the Suns got a big win against the Clippers earlier Tuesday. Devin Booker had a game winner over Paul George, and mainly Paul George, but also kind of Kawhi, and he got fouled too. Like, that should have been and 1, but the buzzer went off. Like, it really didn't matter. And I think that's probably what was going to happen. There's a chance the refs might have missed it. Hey, it is what it is. Refs make mistakes. But I imagine if the ball wouldn't have went in, they probably would have cost. One of those weird things where, like, sometimes the ref waits to see if the ball goes in and then blows the whistle as opposed to blowing the whistle when the foul happens. You see that sometimes. Whether it's intentional or unintentional. You do see it. So yeah, that was a good, they were up most of the game. It was back and forth there down the stretch. So the Clippers had to make a sort of little mini run in the fourth quarter just to even get the game back close again. And then, the Suns were able to hold off after they missed, I forget who missed the shot, but it might have been Booker. But, when they missed the shot, Zubac got the rebound, turned it over, then they got it back to Booker. And you knew he was putting it up. It was just whether or not it was going to go in. And Devin Booker put it in. Shout out to him. All NBA caliber player. Not going to make it probably because the Suns aren't that good or weren't that good pre-bubble. And these games don't really count for that kind of stuff. But hey, I mean, you're showing that he's doing his thing. So shout out to him. But yeah, so the race for the 8th seed is getting very interesting because now, like I said, with Jaren Jackson hurt, there's a legitimate chance that the Grizzlies might fall, not even just fall down to the 9, but might fall down to like 10, where they're not even in the play-in game anymore. Like, there's a legitimate chance with that happening because, like I said, their schedule is very tough, and now they're missing probably their second best player. I would think, yeah, Jaren Jackson's their second best player behind John Morant, at least in my opinion. So yeah, it's just, and that's hard to make up. I mean, he's a guy that has played great for them all year. He's a guy that was averaging throughout the season 17 points, like 5 rebounds, shooting 47% from the field, about almost 40% from 3. Like, that's just not an easy thing to make up. Again, especially now when you don't really have a whole lot of time to afford some growing pains with the new lineup. Like, you have to win almost every game at this point, especially after starting 0-3. And who knows if they'll be able to do it. I guess obviously some guys will have to step up. The Brandon Clarks of the world have to step up. Valanciunas will have to play better. Dylan Brooks have to step up. Like, they're going to have to, I don't know who they're going to bring off the bench to have them try to step up. Maybe like, I don't know. I'm interested to see who they're going to have off the bench try to step up and replace Jaren Jackson. Because again, it's not going to be an easy replacement. But then, like I've been saying, they got the Grizzlies. They got the Blazers on their heels. They got the Spurs on their heels. Pelicans, Suns. So it's not going to be tough no matter how good they play. Even in that absence of Jaren Jackson Jr., it's going to be tough for the Grizzlies. It was always going to be tough for the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies kind of got done dirty, as John Morant said, due to this whole bubble situation. But hey. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. They still got to go out there and play the games, and you just got to hope that some of these teams start losing. And that's basically what you got to hope for now. Some of these teams start losing. The Spurs play the Nuggets tomorrow. Well, I guess today when you guys are hearing this, that's a game they could lose. Though again, the Grizzlies play the Jazz, the game that they could lose. Falcons play the Kings, so you need the Kings to win that one. Pacers play the Suns. You need the Pacers to win that one. Blazers will play the Nuggets. You need the Nuggets to try hard in that one, even though it's a back-to-back. And they may go. It depends on how hard they'll go. And plus, they're still trying to get guys back from the quarantine and stuff like that. So we'll see once those guys can start being a part of the team and everything, like Jamal Murray, Barton, those kind of guys. See when they can come back. But yeah, now you're kind of at the mercy of other teams and how hard they try. Like I said, there's certain teams that are kind of locked into their position. And they might use this as a little bit extra rest. Though you shouldn't need after 4 months, but it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But yeah, no, that's probably at this point the most exciting thing in the bubble because again, almost every outside of the East, because the East is undecided. But again, all those teams are like kind of sorry, and the Wizards would need to rattle off because they're 7.5 games back of the Magic now. They need to win. I think you need to be within 4. So you need to make up 3.5 games in like 5 or 6 games. Like that's probably not going to happen, especially with this Wizards team. So everyone's basically locked into their playoffs spot. I mean, into the playoffs, except for like I said, the 8th seed, and then the West is just trying to jockey for position at this point. But yes, and speaking of that, that's the next big thing. Is I guess honestly all the seeds really, because I mean the Clippers, if they don't get it together, like I said, that the Suns are not a team they should lose to, but they found a way to do it. They play the Mavs on Thursday. Then they play the Blazers, play the Nets. They should beat the Nets, but they should beat the Suns. Then they play the Nuggets and they play the Thunder. So those are all teams that are going to try. There's a potential first round matchups in maybe the Mavericks or even the Thunder, and then a potential second round matchup in the Nuggets. So these are all teams that they're going to have to try to. Again, depending on how hard they try, but these are all good teams that they're going up against. These aren't just going to be easy gimme games for the Clippers, and they're only 1 game up on the Nuggets for that 3 seed. And then the Nuggets are 2 games up. They're 2 games clear of the 4, which is the Rockets right now. They should be good there as long as, again, they don't have their own little slide. And then, like I said, 4 through 6, and the other was going to be the other interesting part, and that's stayed interesting. The Rockets and Jazz are currently tied. And the Thunder are a half game back, of them. And they're also 2 games up on the Mavs. So barring a losing streak. They should be at least in the 6. But, yeah, you never know with these things. But, yeah, it'd be interesting to see kind of how that all plays out, because the Rockets, like I said, they had a chance to go to 3-0, build themselves some cushion. Weren't able to do that. They play like I said, they play they play the Lakers on Thursday. So that'd be an interesting one, just to see how that small ball lineup works, because it worked enough because they only gave up 110 points, but that's the thing. They're going to get killed on the boards every game. You kind of have to accept that. I mentioned Melo had 11. Nurkic had 19 rebounds and 18 points. Zach Collins had 7. Dame had 9. CJ had 7. Whiteside had 7 rebounds. Like, again, they're just going to give up a lot of rebounds. They got out-rebounded 64-39. It's just, like, that's just the thing they're going to do now. And they hope to make up for it in three-point shooting. They hit 19 threes to the Blazers 12. So, like I said, they're going to try to, like, all right, you guys can get all the rebounds you want, blah, 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 get the little easy 2s, second chance points like that. We're going to knock down some threes. And it's kind of sort of been working. But again, it's going to be interesting to see, because the Lakers are a team they're going to have to get past. Like, the Blazers, they're not going to see them, because the Blazers are going to play if they get to the playoffs, they're going to play the Lakers in the first round. That's the team that the Lakers aren't going to want to face, because again, they got the size and they got the guards. And that's important. And then plus they got, in the playoffs, you need guys that can hit tough shots, as like Con talks about. That's why Kawhi was so big for the Raptors, is that even if he was kind of covered, even if he didn't have like a clear lane or a clear shot to get off, he was still able to make a bunch of tough, especially mid-range jumpers and even threes. And that's the same thing that Dame and CJ can do. They can get off tough shots over good defense. And that's kind of what you're going to need in the playoffs. So you're not just going to be able to get easy looks all the time. And like I said, they have the size, in theory, to match up with like the Anthony Davis and the Dwight Howards and the JaVale McGee's, Kuzma, those kind of guys. They have the size to match up with them. Whether it'll work or not will be interesting. And plus, they got a third guy who I didn't even, Nurkic is probably their third guy, but they got a guy, Gary Trent Jr., who's in a lot of who's been, I don't know if he's been in this all season, but he's in their closing lineups now, and he's been playing really good. He had 16 points again today. Had hit 4 threes. He's been, I think Stan Van Gundy said on the broadcast he's shooting like 70% or something like that from 3. In the bubble, he's had games of 17, 21, and 16 points. So that's not something they were. Is that what he was doing all season? Shooting well from 3 all season. He's shooting 41% from 3 for the season, but he's only averaging 8.1 points. So he's really taking his game up to another level in those 4 months off. And that's an added bonus for them. But that's a third guy that you can't just leave open. You have to account for him, and if you leave him open, he's going to knock down the shots. So, like I said, the Lakers don't want to have to see that. Again, they should be the favorite. They should beat them, but that's not going to be an easy out. But yeah, like I said, basketball's back. It's fun. It's entertaining so far. Like I said, no real hiccups due to that Rona, which is always a good sign. But yeah, it just gives us a lot to talk about and a lot to be interested in due to all the different races that you have. Again, the race for the 4, race for the 5, 6, race even for the 2 or the 3, depending on how that goes, and obviously the race for the 8. Like every position really is up for grabs. Obviously, 7 teams are locked into the playoffs, but their position is not necessarily locked in, which makes it interesting. I suppose when you look at the East, like most of their spots are kind of sort of locked in. Like neither the Magic or the Nets are getting up to the 6th seed, like things like that. Like their positions are a little bit more solid. So, less exciting, but just still very fun basketball, very entertaining basketball. So, I know we're all, again, assuming you guys are basketball fans out there as well, we're all happy about that. So, when we come up from this break, we got to switch over to the East, talk about them, and talk about T.J. Warren being the best player in the bubble, talking about the Bucks looking rough today. And I don't care if Giannis only played a half. They were losing that half too. So, we'll talk about all that stuff right after the break. So stay right there.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Here again on the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by GSMC Podcast Network. So, the East. We gotta talk about it. Now, I'm not saying the Bucks should get kicked out of the bubble. I'm not even saying that the Nets didn't deserve to win the game, because they definitely did. They played better than the Bucks the entire game. Point blank period. I mean, they scored 73 points and a half. I mean, in all honesty, it should count as like 3 losses for the Bucks. To be honest, like they should, instead of being 5 games up, they should only be 2 games up on the Raptors for the 1 seed. And I mean that nicely, because again, these are professionals. These aren't like these weren't like high schoolers that beat them or whatever. Like these are professional basketball players. They're in the NBA for a reason. With that being said, though, how did like the Bucks, like what are y'all doing, Milwaukee? How like. And again, a lot of people say like, oh, Giannis only played the first half. Giannis only did this. Giannis only did that. Chris Middleton, he only played the first half. They only played, 16 minutes each. Cool. Brook Lopez was out. Cool. All their stars only played about, less than 20 minutes. I can't argue with that. But they were still down heading into halftime. Like, you can say all that stuff, make it sound as good as you want. They gave up 40 and 33 points in the first half. With the start, that's what the starters. Again, the starters played a majority of that half. Giannis was out there. He was hooping. 7 of 8, 16 points, if I remember correctly, in that first half. He was hooping. But you know who else was hooping? Timothé Luwawu-Cabarrot. Now, I imagine most of you guys do not know of any TLC other than the music group. And I mean, I can't say I blame you. I only know him because he played on the Thunder for a short period of time. I believe it was last season, if I remember correctly. He didn't get too much run, but he was at least on the team. Will it tell me? No, 2018, 2019. No, that was last season. No, I'm bugging out. Again, this season's been so long. This year's been so long, it's kind of hard to remember when everything happened. But yeah, so he didn't play that many games when he played in, 21 games before he got traded to the Bulls, and he played much more with the Bulls, obviously, because the Bulls weren't nearly as good as the Thunder were, even though, the Thunder were alright, but they were better than the Bulls, obviously. I mean, even this year for the Nets, he hasn't played that much, only played in 41 games, but, as we talked about a little bit, guys utilizing the bubble to kind of set themselves apart and kind of cement their little breakout for the future, which some guys have taken advantage of, i.e. Michael Porter Jr. He just had a career high 37 the other day. So, like I said, some guys using this opportunity for good, and we'll get to another guy who again, if you weren't, I guess outside of maybe Anthony Davis, has probably been the best player in the bubble so far. You could argue because again, Anthony Davis is a little bit more on both ends. But again, at least Anthony Davis is supposed to be good. This guy, while he's a scorer, he's not supposed to be scoring like this. No one saw this coming. But yeah, there's no reason for the Bucks to lose this game. I'm sorry. This is the starting 5 for the Nets. Lance Thomas, who just got back in the league. Rodions Kurucs, Garrett Temple, Tyler Johnson, again, just got added to the Nets, and then TLC. But that if that was a regular season game like that lineup would not beat a lot of teams. Period. Point blank. Period. And maybe you catch a team on a second end of a back-to-back. You catch them they were out in New York City too long the night before. That might happen. But the Bucks were coming off a loss to the Rockets on Sunday. And had, like I said, they had the Monday off. And again, it's Orlando, it's whatever. It's a weird scenario. But again, that doesn't... We're not up here giving the Bucks excuses. There's no reason for them to lose that game to the Nets. But, shout out to the Nets. Because at the end of the day, you got to go out and win it too. Like, you can't... A team can try not to lose and still end up winning. Like, the Nets still have to go out there and win the game. That's what they did. They went out there and win the game. Garrett Temple, with the... I think it was a little step back jumper to give them the lead. They didn't even get the Bucks didn't even get a shot off there at the end of the game. And yeah, shout out to the Nets. And like I said, should count as 3 losses for the Bucks. The Bucks should, instead of being 1-2, which is already a rough start, and we'll talk about later on in the show, if who you think the favorite is out of the East in terms of whether would you take the Bucks or the Field to get out of the East. But yeah, that's just like a bad mark on their record. Again, does it matter? Probably not. But they got good teams coming up. They got the Heat coming up, a team that could give them some trouble. As we talked about with their defense against the Rockets, it was predicated a lot on just the Rockets missing a lot of threes, because I think the Rockets missed, 40 threes in that game? I'm going to go check the box score. Yeah, they should have missed 40 threes. PJ Tucker was 3 of 12. Harden was 3 of 12. Covington was 3 of 9. Hey, again, and it's not even like they were missing contest, a lot of those jumpers, especially the ones in the corner. PJ Tucker was missing some wide open shots, bro. That's not sound defense, which is crazy for them because they're like one of the best. I mean, they are the best team in the league. You could argue. I mean, not you could argue that. I mean, best team in the league. You could argue that because people say the Lakers. It all depends. But in terms of opponents' points per game, they're the 4th best defense in the West in terms of, like I said, points per game. And I think they're only behind the Lakers are the only team that have a better defense than them in the West. So in the East, like I said, they're 4th. And their point differential was plus 10.8, far and away the best point differential in the league. So they've been a dominant team all year. So it's crazy to see them go through this in the bubble. But hey, that was the whole entire point of the bubble, which a lot of point people are making, is that you can't just assume teams are going to pick back up from where they left off in March. That's just not how it goes. Especially since now you're playing good teams almost every night. Again, they still got to get some games because I think they play the Wizards and the Grizzlies. But like I said, back-to-back games against the Heat, the Mavs, and the Raptors. All those are good teams. All those are playoff teams. All those are teams. Well, 2 of those teams are teams that they're going to have to face potentially to get to the finals. So again, these aren't just walks in the park. They have to play the Rockets, a team that's good. That's one of probably might be the 3rd team you would take outside of the Clippers and the Lakers in the West, especially the way they're playing now. And then the Nets are the Nets. That's not a game you lose. I don't care what team you are. If like I said, if the Grizzlies lost to them, it still wouldn't be a good loss with that lineup. So yeah, that was a mess. But as we talked about before, T.J. Warren continues to be on fire. Now I don't know what T.J. Warren did over the 4-month break. I don't know who he worked out with. I don't know what he did to his body, what his diet was like, what his routine was like. But he need to do that every offseason. Because right now he's coming back and he's hooping. And I mean, it's really crazy to see just somebody be this dominant. Again, just game after game after game. Granted, do they need the points? Yes, because they need some scoring with Oladipo still trying to work himself back, and obviously no Sabonis. And no Brogdon. Oh, no. I could have sworn Brogdon opted out. I guess he didn't. He played today against the Magic. But still, T.J. Warren his 3rd 30-point game of the restart. He's now had games 53, obviously the game against the Sixers. Still a mess. 34 and 32. The last 2 games against the Wizards and the Magic, so not the best teams in the world, but I mean the game against the Sixers, who were quote unquote the best team that they played, he dropped 53, and a lot of that was on Ben Simmons. I think, like I mentioned on the stat, I think he shot 9 of 10 or something like that, 5 from 3 when guarded by Simmons, 24 points. So I mean, he was giving everybody that work. It was crazy. Well, yeah, shout out to T.J. Warren. I don't know like I said, don't know what's gotten into him, but he's playing well. And it's really helping the Pacers right now. They're helping keep the Sixers off their back. Because this is a team that I was like, oh, the Sixers are going to pass them. Again, they're missing something, like they no Sabonis. Like I assume there's going to be no Oladipo, but obviously Oladipo is playing now. So did not expect that originally when the schedule came out. But they're I said they're defending them off. They're still holding. I think they're still clinging on to that 5th seed at the moment. Yeah, they're still in the 5 seed. They're 1.5 games up, almost. I guess 2.5 games up. I think they, like I mentioned, they won the season series, if I remember correctly, against the Sixers. So if there's a tiebreaker, it was a tie on the record. They have the edge there, and only a game back of the 4. The 4 being the Heat. So yeah, they're in a good position right now for themselves, and again, a good portion of that is because of T.J. Warren. So it'll be interesting to see if he can keep that up, because I mean, I don't imagine this guy to just become MJ all of a sudden overnight. But he's off to a good start at the very least. So shout out to the Pacers again. They're kind of the slept-on team in the East. No one really considers them. No one considered them when you're talking about the better teams in the East. And I mean, they're not like the best team, but again, clearly it's being shown that they're not going to be the easy out. That I just figured like, oh, the Sixers will be able to pass them, and then like they'll play like those Celtics or the Heat in the first round, lose in like 5 or 6, and then like be out of here. Like no, when T.J. Warren going to be playing like that, hey, they're going to have they're going to give a lot of people a tough series. So that'll be interesting to see if they can continue to keep that up. Also, we had a good game between the Heat and the Celtics. The Heat were able to pull it off, which is a game, again, they kind of needed after losing to the Raptors in the last game. They needed to just, again, because they were faced the Raptors, Celtics, and Bucks back to back to back. So they kind of needed to hopefully come out of those games 2-1, just again to show people that they're, again, a force to be reckoned with in the East. Because those are the teams you're going to have to get through, and plus the Sixers, you would think, in order to get to the finals. Eventually, so you got to make sure that you got to see how you stack up, and this was a good measuring stick for them. And they did this with no Jimmy Butler, if I remember correctly. Yeah, no Butler in this game, so that was again even more impressive of a win for them. And you got some their shooting touch back, Duncan Robinson, who was struggling a little bit early in the bubble. He shot He shot very poorly against the Raptors. Only had 3 points, so he had a nice bounce by game against the Celtics. He had 21. Bam had 21 and 12. Again, he's been great all season. Dragic had 20 off the bench. Tyler Hero had 11 off the bench, plus 3 assists. Kelly Olynyk had 15. So yeah, just a nice, well-rounded performance from them. And they were able to hold the Celtics relatively in check. No one outside of Tatum scored over 20. But I mean, that's kind of Celtics MO. They have a bunch of guys that can score in that 15 to 25 range. They did a good job on Jaylen Brown, who shot 9 of 23 from the field today. They weren't able to get a whole lot out of the bench. Marcus Smart didn't provide much. One person that really provided any sort of scoring touch off the bench was Cantor, who had 10, which I mean is not bad, but nothing too special. Also, Smart was a minus 16 in his 16 minutes, so not exactly the greatest performance from him. But again, this is a good matchup because it's a good measuring stick. You got to see where you're at. If you're playing against the best teams in the East, you got to see, all right, where do we stand? Where do we stack up? Where can we improve? What can we work on going into the playoffs? Because these are the teams you got to play in order to get there. And this was a good test for them, especially with no Butler. Because then obviously you throw in Jimmy Butler. That in theory should help you, though. Again, he was bad down the stretch. Almost on the turnovers against the Raptors. So again, it's a little in between, but at the same time, it's just nice to test yourself, see where you're at. And like I said, the Heat were able to get a nice victory for them. I guess the Raptors don't play again until, I think they play Wednesday. Yeah, they play the Magic Wednesday. I mean, that is what it is. But for them versus the Celtics on Friday, that should be an interesting one. Because again, another one of those measuring stick games. Just see like, all right, where are we at? Because we already beat the Heat, we beat the Lakers. Can keep this up? And also in that Heat game on Monday, Fred VanVleet went off, had a career high 36. What did he shoot? Like 9 of 14? No, I'm looking at Dragic. Excuse me. 8 of 16 from the field, hit 7 threes. So that's the thing. And that's why the Raptors are going to be a tough out, and why I said that they were so underrated for a defending champ. Like, they have different guys that can hit you at that game. Because the game before, the guy that was great was Kyle Lowry. This game and OG was good too. This game is Van Vliet. Next game it could be Siakam. Who, again, Siakam wasn't bad. He had 22, 4-7 from 3. Like, he wouldn't have a bad game. Like I said, who else? They had 15 off the bench from Ibaka. Like, they just have different guys that can show up at different moments for them. And that's kind of the thing, is that when you're looking at like teams like the Bucks, like if it's not Giannis or Middleton, you kind of just hoping somebody else has a good game. And when it's even the Celtics, all right, I know they're a little bit more around it, because you got Tatum, you got Brown, you got Kemba when he's healthy, you got Gordon Hayward that can have a good game, you got Marcus Smart who's improved offensively, so they have a few more guys. It's mainly Jimmy Butler, and everyone else can contribute like somewhere between the 10 and 20 range. Hopefully, they have their guys knocking down threes in those games. Because I know, I think, like, obviously Duncan, I believe it was whoever was commentating the game said that they've been like the best 3-point shooting team in the league this year, which I could totally believe. With some of the guys they have on their roster, I mean, I hope that holds up in the playoffs. These guys will be playing in the playoffs for the first time. And again, no crowd and stuff like that, so hopefully that'll allow for an easier transition, but it's still going to be awkward. It's still going to be something to get used to. It's still going to be, like I said, a lot of these young guys' first experience, and again, having Jimmy Butler on the team is definitely going to help. But you really don't know what someone's going to be like until you get to the playoffs. Like that first year with the Celtics team, when Jaylen Brown's second year, they had a young Terry Rozier, young Marcus Smart, rookie Jason Tatum, no Kyrie, no Gordon Hayward. You had no idea what they were going to look like in the playoffs. And they made it to the finals, took LeBron to 7 games, and honestly could have won that series and made it to the finals. Granted, they would have got smoked by the Warriors, but they could have at least made it. Not impressive. So you kind of always got to see who's going to step up and who's going to shrink. So that's kind of the thing with the Heat, is they don't really have, outside of Butler, and I guess like Olynyk has some of the experience. I'm trying to think who else. Dragic has some experience. Like I feel like they made it while Bam's there, but I don't remember exactly. Iguodala's got some experience. Jay Crowder's on that team now too, right? I think. I know he'd be getting traded a lot. That's why it's hard to keep track with him. But he's on the team, so he's got some experience. So again, they have guys that have some experience now on the roster, but again, it's like a lot of guys are counting on the Kendrick Nuns of the world, the Duncan Robinsons, the Tyler Heroes, even the Bam. Like I said, he doesn't have too much experience if he has any. Those are going to be some of the big contributors for the team. They have to get them ready to go for the playoffs and make sure that they're ready for that moment. And that's why it's good to have these measuring stick games against the other teams in the East to see kind of where you stand. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see, because there's a lot of good matchups in the East in terms of like the higher seeded teams coming up in these next 6 games or so. And plus, you can see what other surprises happen. Like I said, everyone came to the game. I think it was the biggest upset of the season in terms of like the spread. The Bucks were like 18, 19 point favorites, something like that, over the Nets. A lot of people were like on Twitter, obviously making bets like, oh, if the Nets win this game, I'll get a Jared Allen tat, or I'll get a Chris Chioza tat, something like that. Because it was like, there's no way the Bucks lose this game. Not to this team with no Karras, no Jared Allen, no Joe Harris. But hey, it's the bubble. Anything could happen. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what that anything is over these next few days, as again bubble ball and the Disney Invitational continues on. But yeah, it's like, again, it's just nice to have basketball back, and nice to have good basketball back. It's, like I said, it'd be worse if the games weren't that entertaining, but even like, again, the team games against like involving quote unquote bad teams have still been entertaining. Like, there's only been a few like, oh wow, this game stinks, I'm not even gonna watch this games from the bubble so far. So that's, plus kudos to the NBA for giving these guys enough time to get ready, and then allowing for these matchups in order to have these good competitive games. And speaking of competition, there are some guys that won't be competing next year. And obviously, we know, like every sport, there's been people opting out. People like deciding, like, nah, this isn't worth it. It's not for me. And that has now trickled down to the college game, because we had one guy opt out last week, and now we've had another guy opt out today, and potentially another guy that could opt out as early as tomorrow. So we'll talk about all 3 of those guys, who they are, and why I think it's a big deal, and also do I think more guys will end up taking that same route. We'll discuss all of that right after the break. So, stay right there.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And we are back here again on the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by GSMC Podcast Network. So, I was incorrect in terms of I thought this happened last week. I guess this happened on Monday, which again tells me how thrown off this pandemic has been with the days and stuff, because it seems like stuff that happened a long time ago. Just stuff that happened like not that long ago happened a long time ago, and stuff that happened a long time ago happened like yesterday. It was like, again, the concept of time is all kind of messed up due to the fact that we've been in the house more or less. Again, you can leave and do other things, go to the store, go to a restaurant, stuff like that. But like in terms of just being out and about, frolicking, carefree, no, that is no more, and it won't be anytime soon. But we're not going to get into that on this year podcast. So the first athlete, or at least I'm pretty sure the first college football player. I don't want to talk about for all athletics, because I don't know. At least in terms of football, the first guy to opt out was Virginia Tech corner Caleb Farley. Farley. I want to say it's Farley. That's how it's like written. You get the point. But he opted out due to what he claimed were concerns over staying healthy amid the coronavirus pandemic and the Hokies' inadequate testing and masking procedures. Obviously, their chief medical officer refuted those things. Again, he has to, or he doesn't want to lose his job over the fact that they're not taking the pandemic seriously. That'd be a rough way to lose your job. But again, these are just his accounts. That's just him. Obviously, again, I would like to think he wouldn't lie about this. There's really no reason for him to lie. But yeah, he did a first person account for NBC Sports Football Morning in America, and he wrote that guys were going home, going to Myrtle Beach, coming back to campus, and we weren't getting tested. We were all together, working out, close to each other. You have no real idea who might have it, if anybody might have it. One day I look around and we're like 100 deep in an indoor facility, no mask. My concern grew more and more, and it should be noted that his mother died from breast cancer in 2018. I think it was, 2018. So he said that again, after he wanted to make sure he kept himself and in turn potentially his family safe, because again they didn't lose a family member due to COVID, but they lost family member not that long ago. So you don't want to do anything that could potentially put another family member at risk. So I understand from his perspective why he would feel that way. And he said that he was going to spend the fall training for the NFL draft, preparing for the combine in February, and apparently Coach Justin Fuente, Virginia Tech coach, talked to him, and he said he understands his decision and the context of the decision around when it comes to COVID and why he decided to sit out. And also, it's reported, I knew very little about him because I didn't watch much ACC outside of Clemson this past year. But apparently, it's a first round caliber corner, and if that is to be true, there's literally no reason why he should play. Why he should play this year. Like literally none. Like it doesn't seem at all worth it. I'm trying to let me look at what his stats were looking like last year. So he had 4 interceptions. Okay. 12 pass defense. That's not bad for a true sophomore. That's not bad at all. He had 2 interceptions, 7 pass defense as a freshman. So yeah, okay. Maybe he's something. 6'2", 207. It's a good size. So yeah, if he's again, maybe Virginia Tech can work through some of these procedures and protocols that maybe were a little lax, in his opinion. But at the same time, if he felt unsafe, then hey, don't play. It doesn't seem worth it, especially for a season that I don't think is going to. I mean, well, one shouldn't be played because it doesn't make any sense. There's no kids on campus. Why would you? They're not going to have kids in classes in a lot of these schools. Like, why would you be trying to play college football? And if you are having kids in classes, then definitely why are you playing college football? Because, I mean, I think there wasn't there was a school in Georgia where like a bunch of employees got there was like an outbreak. There was another school somewhere else that just opened up recently that had like an outbreak on the first day. Some kid showed up there with like the COVID positive at the I don't know. I don't think they shut it down, but they potentially could have an outbreak. And just like one of those things where, all right, the athletes, not just football, but the fall athletes could be being tested, wearing masks, doing different things. That doesn't mean they're going to be around people that are doing it. It doesn't mean that they're going to stop. Like, who's going to police them from going to bars or going to places to eat or going to, like, obviously going to dorms, going to classrooms. All this stuff's inside, which is where it has been said it's easier for the virus to spread if it's not properly ventilated in there. And I don't think these schools spent the summer getting some sort of new air filtration system. So there's a chance that you could put a player could be put in a position where he's exposed to the virus and exposed to the rest of the team, then it's a disaster. Because, I mean, again, we're talking about, like, in the bubble, you're not really worried about postponing games because, like, everybody's COVID-free, more or less. But with baseball, as we're seeing, they're having to postpone games. I think it was, like, at one point last week, like, 6 different teams weren't playing, which is, like, 20% of the league, like, wasn't playing. And it's, like, everybody, even now, like, everyone's games are all, like, kind of uneven. Like, some teams play 10, 11, some teams play, like, 4 or 5, some teams play 8. Like, it's all out of whack. Here are the numbers, and again, they were trying to make it up with doubleheaders and stuff at the end of the season, but you can't do that in any other sport. Like, you can do it in baseball, even though you don't do it a lot, but you can do it, and that's why I do in the 7 innings. But you can't do that in football. You can't play 2 games in the same day. You can't do it with basketball. I mean, I guess you could, because again, a lot of these AAU tournaments, when these kids were younger, they could, but I mean, LeBron's not playing 2 games in the same day. That's just not happening. James Harden, Russell Westbrook, Giannis, Kawhi, Paul George, like, none of these guys are playing 2 games in the same day. It's not possible. So if you have a situation where a game has to get postponed or canceled, like, you're screwed. And that's kind of where the football is going to be at, whether college or pro. At least, like, with the pros, I understand. Like, the players got money on the line. Like, if they don't play, they might not be able to pay their rent, pay their mortgage, pay some of the people around them, agents, financial advisors, different people that are counting on them for money, because they could support and they could fund whatever they need to be funded. So I get that. But when we're talking about college, the only person that's standing to make the money are the people that aren't going to be on the field. Like, again, you got the coaches are going to be on the field. You got the, like, again, commissioners, like the athletic directors, the school itself. All those people don't take on any risk. The athletes are taking on the risk of playing and they're taking on the risk of possibly getting that Rona. Double whammy. It's not worth. That's why, again, we have the whole Pac-12 situation going on the way it's going on. Because it's like, why are we putting ourselves out there for literally nothing while you guys are out here making all the money on the back end and the front end? Like, that really don't make no sense. So I don't begrudge and I don't condemn or badmouth Fairly or Farley for backing out. I won't condemn anyone that backs out, especially not during now. It's like, at this point, if there's anything that we've learned in this pandemic, at least a little bit, is that, if we didn't already know this, Americans are very individualistic. They care about themselves, and they could care less what happens to other people. Oh, not everybody. I don't want to put that on every American, but a lot of Americans do feel that way. That's why you have the whole, like, mask debate and, like, oh, this virus is all this other foolishness. So at the same time, if it's like, hey, look, they got the school, you got whoever, all your teammates, whoever look and count on you, that's great. That's cool. That's fine. I understand, but at the same time, I gotta look out for myself. If I think I'm going to put myself at risk or someone, like a friend or family member at risk, like, there's no reason to even chance this. Because like I said, we're seeing with baseball, you're going to have cases. It's just going to depend on how bad it gets. And we're talking about schools, like thousands and thousands of people flooding college campuses all over the country in the middle of a pandemic. You can't possibly believe that that they're not going to have outbreaks. There were outbreaks when it was just the students by themselves, really. Whether it was just football or just other fall sports. When it was just them on campus, there were still outbreaks. They had to shut down workouts and stuff. So what do you think when you put thousands of kids on campus, and most of them won't have to do the strict testing protocols and social distancing and mask stuff that these athletes have to do? It's going to be a disaster. So in that same vein, another player opted out, and that was Rashad Bateman, another first-round caliber guy, receiver from Minnesota, who was very good last year as a sophomore. I know firsthand because he... it was a junior, excuse me. No, he's going to be junior this year, yeah. The college football reference screwed me up there. But yeah, he was a sophomore last year, had 1,200 yards, 11 touchdowns, on 60 receptions, over 20 yards per catch, dominated Penn State. Not that I'm bitter about that, but that was the game I knew. I was like, oh, I'd heard something about him. He had like a bunch of 100-yard games earlier in the season. He had been kind of shaky leading to the Penn State game, and just was like, oh, I'm going to go for 7 and 120, and, excuse me, not 1, 2, 203. 7 receptions, 203 yards, 1 touchdown, 29 yards per catch. Absolutely dominated. I mean, Minnesota dominated the game anyway, but he was amazing. I was like, oh, okay, this guy's really good. It's a shame he can't come out this year. And then he was like, I can't come out this year, but it doesn't mean I'm going to play next year. So I'm like, hey, look, I get it. And his thing was a similar stance on terms of he was another one that was a little uncertain about the health and safety in the midst of the pandemic, and he wanted to make sure like him and his family and everyone else around him were were as cautious as they could be and make sure that he didn't risk exposing them to the disease. So again, it makes sense that he was just going to skip the season and potentially declare for the 2021 draft. And he's doing that. Micah Parsons, the linebacker from Penn State, a guy who's potentially even a higher draft pick than these two guys. He's talked about being top 5, top 10, like almost consensus at this point. One of the best defensive players in the country, not just in my opinion, but in many people's opinions. It's reported that he's gonna opt out early Wednesday, which is unfortunate for him that he wasn't able to get the news out first. Because now again, you're gonna have people hitting him up trying to talk him out of it, all that stuff. And again, if he wants to do it, he should do it. Don't let other people's opinions on your decision sway you. But it's going to happen now that the news is already floating out there because it leaked somehow. I don't know who would have leaked it, but I imagine it might have been somebody at Penn State trying to try to gauge the temperature on and see like if people support him or if maybe try to talk him out of it. I don't know. That's just me assuming here. Don't know. I don't have any reason for this to leak out. Like that's just kind of strange because I don't think he would put it out there. So it'd have to be somebody at the school that was like, hey, Micah Parsons is going to opt out. Because how else would this one reporter kind of touch on it? And he, Eric something on Twitter. But if you just search Micah Parsons, you'll find it. But yeah, so even with him, another guy where it's like, all right, so on top of the fact that football is inherently dangerous, on top of the fact that these guys are all almost consensus first-round picks, and there's no real reason for them to put themselves to another season of potential injury, and you got a whole pandemic going on, it made total sense, especially in a season now where there's a good chance the season doesn't even finish. We're talking about playing in a season that might not even be completed. Like, of course people are going to opt out. It makes no sense to put yourself at risk for what could potentially be 5-6 games, where not only do you put yourself at risk to catch that Rona, again, you put yourself at risk to get an injury and potentially lose money. And like I would imagine, not that many teams are going to hold this against the players, as was the rumor kind of floating out there, as supposedly some high-profile NFL names that are supposedly going to opt out before Thursday's deadline. We'll see if that comes to fruition or not. But, I mean, hey, that'll really rattle the NFL world. Which is why I think it was like, I think it was one of them Corey twins. I forget if it was Devin or Jason. We kind of talked about this before. He was on the NFL for trying to move the deadline up because they didn't want too many more people opting out. They didn't expect this many people to opt out, even though, again, it makes total sense. There's a lot of overweight linemen that could potentially be at risk. Not just them, but then you got guys like Von Miller who are in great shape but have asthma. Like, there's a lot of people that could potentially fall in that high-risk category. So it's like, is it really worth it to go through a season that, again, the NFL season's probably going to get played. If it's going to get completed, completely different story. Because if you have two teams miss one game, how does that work? Like, if you have to postpone even or cancel even one game, what happens? I'm not going to say it's going to happen, but it's not unlikely. But yeah, I understand for these college athletes, it makes total sense, and especially since you're not doing it for any money. Like, at least if you were getting paid, all right, I can see you want to get that money. But you're not doing it, you're doing it for free. Like, no. If I'm that good, and we'll see, if let somebody like Trevor Lawrence opt out, they might as well just cancel the season, in my personal opinion. Like, what's the point? If Trevor Lawrence isn't playing, Justin Fields, those type of guys aren't playing. Michael Parsons was one of those type of guys. Rashad Bateman was one of those type of guys. Farley was one of those type of guys that were like, people are gonna want to tune in to watch. And again, these aren't just like mediocre players. Like, these are almost like almost consensus first, maybe second round picks in the next year's draft. Like, across a lot of scouts' boards. So again, these aren't nobodies. These are very big names in the college football world that are like, yeah, no, it's not worth it. And again, it's on the heels of the Pac-12 as a conference, like 100 plus players being like, we're not going to play. And so, like I said, it's nice to see the players taking their power. This kind of thing never would have happened. Not even just as recent as last year. Like, no one's opting out. How many are, like, at best, people still get grief for opting out for bowl games from certain fans. They'll be like, oh, how could you let your teammates down? Blah blah blah. I'm like, unless we're playing for national championship, why am I going to play in the Sun Bowl if I'm a first round pick? For what purpose? If I'm a first round pick before that game, there's not anything I can do that's going to change that. What am I playing for? For the Outback Bowl, the Gator Bowl championship? Like, come on, bro. The GoDaddy, the Idaho Potato. Like, what? Like, no, I'm not doing that. So again, shout out to these players for, again, the bowl game is a tough decision in and of itself as a whole. These guys are talking about the entire season, so I'm interested to see if more first round caliber guys opt out. Because again, it just doesn't. If the procedures and protocols you don't think they're going to be right, and you think you're going to put yourself at risk, and as we saw with the Red Sox pitcher, just because you're fine and you live does not mean you're not going to have issues. And who knows if the heart issues was going to extend for a 162 game season, but in a 60 game season he's out. Like, that's not nothing. That's at least a couple months, and that's, again, if something happens like that to one of these players, that's basically their whole season shot. So what's the point of dealing with that? While also, again, having to deal with potential of other injuries, ACLs, Achilles, different things like that. That doesn't really make any sense to me. Again, I'm not the one making the decision. I'm the one judging these people for this decision. So, shout out to these players for being willing to stand up and be like, nah, this isn't it. We'll be interested to see if any other players join them. Because, again, even just those first two were kind of a big deal. But if Parsons joins them as well, yeah, college football may have a problem on their hands. Because more guys may be like, you know what? Why am I doing this? I don't need to play. I'm good. Like, I'm going to the NFL off the film I got. Off those first 2 years. Like, I'm straight. Like, why am I going to subject myself to this? It's a fair question to ask. And I think a lot of these guys will be talking with the family, talking with advisors, agents, things like that, potentially coaches, other players, and being like, you know what? This ain't worth it. So, we'll see how that goes. And speaking of potential injury, there's been a rash of pitcher injuries this year, especially the big name guys already. And only, 2-3 weeks into the season. 10, 11 games. And we already got a bunch of guys out. So I want to talk about that because, again, it's a problem that I thought was going to happen, and now we're fully here. And just like, what does the MLB do? On top of the fact they got to try to navigate this Rona, because it's, I think, 7 Cardinals players now, 13 members of the organization as a whole have it, and I doubt they'll be the last ones. But yeah, so you got to navigate that, and then now you got to deal with all these pitchers and big name pitchers being out due to injury. So, what do they do from there, and how do they kind of go about dealing with this? So we'll discuss all that right after the break. So stay right there.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And we are back here again on the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by GSMC Podcast Network. So the Ringer actually did a nice little article about this. So it's from Ben Lindenberg. So this was from Monday. So I would, you could go read the full article there. I'm kind of just going to overview it and abbreviate it. But he did an article about the injured pitchers are MLB's other big pandemic problem. And again, talking about the uptick, and it seems like pitchers that are ending up on the injured list this year for various reasons. But yeah, when you have guys like, so you talked about in this article, I guess the first example he used was Miles Michaelis, a pitcher from St. Louis, who was an All-Star in 2018, and he was made 32 starts each the past 2 seasons. He was placed on, he was injured. He had some sort of forearm strain, and he'll need any surgery to repair a damaged flexor tendon. You know, guys like Cole Hamels, Corey Kluber, Justin Verlander, Clayton Kershaw, who again was back now, but he was an early scratch in the beginning of the season, all dealing with various different ailments. A lot of those guys and a lot of these injuries are arm related. I think it was Verlander had a forearm situation. Again, they thought it was going to be season ending. It might not be. You have, and even if you don't even include those guys, you got Hamels, who's out with tricep tendonitis, bicep tendonitis for Homer Bailey. Pitchers like the Blue Jays, Ken Giles, Jimmy Lambert of the White Sox, Michael Feliz of the Pirates. Like, all these guys are out with various forearm or various arm injuries, mainly just forearms. And apparently forearm strains are often used as a euphemism for elbow injuries, which have plagued the likes of Yankees' Tommy Kahnle, the Reds' Matt Bowman, Astros' Chris Davinsky, Robert Osuna. Many, like I said, a bunch of different guys have had to deal with varying levels of elbow injuries especially throughout this season. Like I said, the article does a really interesting and detailed job just labeling. Because I mean, if you just run through the list of players that are out with different arm-related injuries, like I said, you got guys like the Rangers, Jose Leclerc, Dodgers, Alex Wood, Rockies, Wade Davis, Pirates, Kyle Crick. All these guys are dealing with various injuries. Then it's just like, it's really just kind of a lot to deal with. Well, especially when a lot of these guys went on the injured list or happened to be on the injured list either like right before or sometime soon after the season was about to restart again. And just one of those things where it was kind of a thing that you were afraid of having happen. And it was like, all right, you might figure like one guy here, one guy there, something like that. But like a lot of guys and a lot of pitchers are dealing with injuries, and it's just that like it had to be a fear for the league when you knew they were having this abbreviated season, especially when they're having it so far removed from spring training. And these guys, though I imagine these guys were not pitching for the 4 months that they were off. But again, they're not facing live batters. It's not the same intensity. The pitches aren't of the same magnitude as they would be in an actual game. So again, the circumstances are different. The stakes are different. Even if you're throwing like a bullpen or throwing like a pitching session or like a 30 pitch session, something like that, during the quarantine, like that's not the same as throwing in a high leverage situation in the eighth inning with 2 runners on in a game that, again, where every game counts as like 3, where you need to win as many of these games, especially early, to give yourself some cushion as possible. And like I said, when you saw players trying to get themselves backed up for like during spring training 2.0, you saw a lot of guys like go down with something. Not all these are season ending potentially, but the fact that there's a lot of guys and a lot of similar type of injuries, which is the forearm strain, is worrisome. If I were Rob Manfred, and again, he's got a lot on his plate to deal with. We can say that for sure. He's, like I said, he got to deal with that Rona. Again, I think it did get put out that the Cardinals and Marlins probably weren't as cautious as they should have been when they were out and about in the cities. While again the Rona is still alive and well. Don't forget that, people. But again, that's on the players' fault. But at the same time, the fact that there was no real protocols in place for like what to do if like a game got postponed, or how we decide if a game gets postponed or canceled, or different things like that. Like the fact that there was no protocols like that in place before the season started shows that the MLB wasn't prepared for this. They were going to try to just like, hey, we're just going to wing it and just deal with it when we got to deal with it. The fact that again there weren't like penalties or different things in place or guidelines in place to say like, all right, you guys can't be here, can't be there, can't be there. I mean, again, Lou Will left the bubble for a funeral, went to an adult establishment, got himself some food. As I guess he kind of talks about after this game, but it was just something that's just what he does. At 5:30, 6 o'clock, he just goes there, gets some food, sit down, and do his thing. It wasn't anything like too out of the ordinary for him, but at the same time, he just wasn't thinking like, oh, well, I should not be here right now. And he had a mask on. I don't even know if these other these baseball guys had masks on when they were out and about at these different establishments. And he had to quarantine for 10 days. Like before he got back, are these like the fact there are no real protocols in place for if you put yourself in a high risk situation, and you just like, hey, you could be a high risk, and then just come back to the team, and like no one's gonna know until everyone testing positive for Corona, and you can play with it and potentially infect other players and other players around the league, other coaches around the league, other staff members around the league, like the fact that. Again, is it on the players? Yes, but the fact that it wasn't strictly written in the some sort of guidelines or whatever in that big 113-page manual I think they had for the coronavirus is wild to me. So as I said, that's one thing Manfred has to deal with, and now we got to deal with the fact that a bunch of pitchers are going to be hurt. You're going to be facing a lot of replacement pitchers, and that's an issue. Because again, at the end of the day, no matter what sport it is, you want to see the stars. You want to see the best players, even whether it's your team or another team. You come to the games, you watch the games, you be like, all right, this guy's playing, this guy's pitching, this guy's in the lineup today. You want to go see those guys. And if a lot of these pitchers, at least, aren't going to be there, that's going to be an issue. Especially when you already have to compete with the NBA. You already have to compete with the NHL. You're lucky that there's no preseason games you got to compete with football in August. But then once September hits, you got to compete with football. You're not winning Sundays. No one's going to care. And just the thing, just like now should be the time where they kind of help build their fan base and help grow it and try to see like, all right, ways we can grow the sport both again, mainly just nationally first, and then you work on the international from there. Because again, baseball's an international game. The MLB might not be that international, but the baseball itself is international. A lot of players from a lot of different countries want to play baseball and want to get to the MLB. But like I said, at the same time, it's like this should be that opportunity during this time where everyone's mainly at home. There's a lot of downtime, a lot of stuff that needs to fill airtime on the television. That should allow you to have an opportunity to grow your fan base, and it's going to hurt not only if the games have to get stopped and things like that, but also if the best people and the best pitchers and the best players in general just aren't out there. That's what the issue is. That's one of the issues that the MLB is dealing with. And just like I said, it's not just like one guy or like two guys on a team. It's like a lot of guys. And as Dusty Baker pointed out, he said it on I guess it was last Monday. He said a lot of the hitters are ready probably in about 3 weeks or so. The pitchers need that extra time. They need 5-6 weeks of spring training. This has been abbreviated, and you see it. It's all around baseball. It's everywhere talking about, again, the injuries that definitely have ravaged the Astros, but have also hurt other teams. And again, it's fair that maybe the Astros' injuries have skewed his opinion, or if it's just something that, hey, that people are realizing and seeing more so, because again, there was a lot of stop and start, a lot of you gotta get ready, then no, you're gonna shut down the camp. Then you gotta get ready. Then oh no, we had an outbreak, we can't go. Now then we're gonna play, or we're gonna agree to 80 game season. Then we're gonna agree to 70. Then we're gonna agree to 50. Then we're gonna agree to 60. It's pretty really had no idea when to start to ramp up, and now we're seeing the effects of it. And it's like I said, it's unfortunate, and it's just one of those things where the MLB is going to have to live with it for the time being, because there's not much they can really do about it. But I think, because I think they're showing, like, even like recently, pitcher injuries have been going up in terms of IL stints in the first 10 games after after opening day, excuse me. There's a graph in the Ringer piece about it. And you see, like, the number went down from 2018 to 2019, now skyrocketed back up to, I guess it takes it back, it was a little bit even through, in terms of pitcher injuries in general. Pitcher arm injuries in general was pretty even. It was going up a little bit, and then now it's skyrocketed, and just pitcher injuries overall have skyrocketed. As we saw, I think it was Mike Soroka who popped his Achilles. And again, that's not an arm injury, but it's just one of those things where he just went to go run to cover first base. And it's like maybe he hadn't been working on those muscles like that during the offseason, hadn't been doing a whole lot of fielding work during the 4 months that he was off, was mainly focused on the pitching. So now he has to go do something athletic, more athletic. His body's not prepared for it. And again, I'm not going to blame it necessarily on the pandemic, but just one of those things where now you got even issues where guys are having injuries that have nothing to do with arms. And it's just like their bodies just aren't ready for the season. They're just not. And it's, like I said, it's unfortunate. It's a shame these guys have to go through this, but it's a thing that I was worried about with a lot of these sports. We haven't seen it too badly with the NBA so far. Again, we had Jerry Jackson, meniscus tear. We got Jonathan Isaac with the ACL. I'm trying to think of anyone else who's gotten like anything serious. Not that I can think of off the top of my head. The injuries haven't been too bad in terms of the NBA so far. Knock on wood, that it holds up. But especially with baseball, with arms and all the stress like pitching already puts on your arm, and now these arms aren't even ready. So now they're under more stress because they're just not prepared for the season. It's going to be even worse, and now we're seeing the effects of that. So it'll be interesting to see. I don't know if interesting is the right word, but interesting for works. It'll be interesting to see how teams manage this, because this is going to be a big thing going forward, is dealing with pitcher injuries, whether it's short term, whether it's long term. You got to figure something out for a lot of these teams, because you only have but so many good pitchers on your staff, whether they're bullpen arms or starters. Like I said, not everybody has no one has 5 great starters and a bunch of great bullpen arms. This is not reasonable. And some teams are better equipped than others. I was a la Dodgers, where Clayton Kershaw gets scratched, Dustin May comes in, and now he's been amazing. Started opening day as a rookie. Didn't phase him at all. Again, some teams are lucky. They just have a plethora of prospects that they can just throw out there. Not everybody's the Dodgers. That just has guys that they can just all right, this guy's hurt, cool, we can replace him with that. This guy's hurt, we can replace him there. Not everybody has that. So it'll be interesting to see how teams manage and deal with all these injuries, because, again, it's not going to be something I think is... obviously, hopefully, as the season goes on, bodies will get more used to the season and more ready and more willing and more able to go. But for these next a week or so, until, again, you hit, the month mark of the season, this is going to be a situation where you're going to be seeing a lot of these. And you just hope that it doesn't hit your team that hard. Another one, Shohei Ohtani. I think Joe Madden I thought I saw something that Joe Madden said today that, he's probably done pitching for the year. And, they paid a decent sum of money to get him over here to do both. Now, again, as we talked about, he's been a good hitter his first 2 years. That's what he should just focus on. But, again, they didn't bring him over to just hit. They brought him over again because the pitching and hitting thought he could be useful, and then again just get some extra fans in the seats to get people interested in the Angels, because obviously Mike Trout probably wasn't enough, and it wasn't enough because no one cared about the Angels. Honestly, it is what it is. But he was supposed to be a part of helping grow the brand of the team, and now the thing that he was marketed being able to do was pitch and hit. Now he can only do one of those things, and that's hit, because his arm is messed up. And again, it's been I think it's that time of job before, so this isn't new. But again, if your arm's not ready to go, and you're throwing as hard as he is, throwing different types of pitches and things like that, putting all the stress on your elbow area, the things like this are bound to happen. So it's unfortunate, but teams going to have to manage this throughout the season, and the team that manages, as we talked about a little while ago, the team that manages the injury the best throughout these restarts may be the team that ends up getting to the playoffs and winning a championship. Again, talent's going to be important, chemistry, things like that, but just injury management in all these sports, whether, again, it's baseball, basketball, football when it starts back up, because you're going to see a lot of injuries there, because there's always injuries in the preseason anyway, but now maybe even more because guys haven't been training as well as they maybe would have in the offseason normally. Hockey, there's different sports you saw with, again, the Sabrina Ionesco sprained ankle in WNBA was a bit of a freak accident, but still, injuries. The teams that handle injury the best, maybe the team that end up hoisting the trophy, at the end of their respective seasons. So we'll see how MLB teams can manage that. But like I said, the Ringer, if you just Google pitcher injuries, it's one of the articles that comes up about it. So I'd read that. It's like a very good, very detailed. It gives a lot of examples of different types of pitchers and people and injuries that players are dealing with currently. So again, if you're a baseball fan, it's a recommended read, in my personal opinion. So speaking of injuries and having to manage that, and also I did slow it out there a little bit, but it's getting some traction again. I think it was Zach Taylor brought up that he might be doing this. The whole quarantine quarterback, basically where you separate quarterbacks and try to keep them healthy throughout the week, and just make sure that you can get to the game with at least one guy ready to go. So I'll talk a little bit more about that, my opinions on it. Now again, it seems like it's going to be a real thing, and also could it extend to other positions? Because as we talked about, there's a chance that a position group could get hit with that Rona. And is it again, quarterback's most important, but do you want to make sure that other positions are ready to go so you don't have to, again, field 5 new linemen or something, or 4 new linemen in a game, where especially when the line is a lot of it's chemistry based. Same thing on defense, same thing with a lot of different positions. So we'll discuss all of that right after the break. Stay right there.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
We are here again on the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by GSMC Podcast Network. So, the quarantined quarterback. So, just the general gist from my understanding of it, if you haven't heard of the concept before, is basically a team, or any team, doesn't really matter who, taking quarterback and having him stay at a separate location from the rest of the team throughout the week. So, in case there's an outbreak during the week in your quarterback room or what have you, have at least one guy that is good to go for Sunday. Now, and I mean, if you just Google quarantine quarterback, you'll see a lot of different articles about it. You'll see should this team have a quarantine quarterback? Should this team have a quarantine quarterback? Or this team considering it, or is this a good idea, or why this team should do it, different things like that. You'll see a bunch of different articles about it. Because again, it's a concept that I think could be adopted potentially. But in my opinion, doesn't make any sense. I mean, does it make any sense? Question mark. Let's dive into that a little bit more. So, in theory, again, you take this quarterback, whatever it is, because And I guess that's the first part is like, who is it? Is it the set of cards? Is it the starter? Because again, you would think that's the most important one. You'd want to make sure he's healthy for Sunday, but then you also need some practice time. So there's that. So is the number 2? Is it the number 3? Is it like a separate quarterback? I know there was the one idea. I think it was by Albert Breer, another writer, who had he had a separate idea, basically as a 4th quarterback almost, that just like stays off site, that's like does everything remotely, stays up to date on the offense that way. And if you need him, you kind of just bring him out and you pay him like $15,000, excuse me, $15,000, something like that, every week, just to again just be ready to go. He's not going to be with the team that much. He's not really going to practice with them. I don't even know if he's going to show up for all the games, because if they don't need him, then there's no point. But yeah, that's what it sounds like, just like an extra roster spot for that. And that's a bit much. Because I'm just like, just have basically have a 4th quarterback, just for the quarantine in case. And I'm like, I don't know about that one. Especially when I imagine the 4th quarterback isn't going to be any good. So if something happens to the first 3, like, you're probably going to lose that. You're better off probably just going to the Wildcat all game. At least the team won't be prepared for that. Like, they'll be prepared for a quarterback, whether he's good or bad. They won't be prepared for no Wildcat for 4 quarters. So if you're like an Eagles, or if you're like, I guess what the Patriots now that they have Mohamed Sanu, like, you're better off just putting him at quarterback for 4 quarters and just rolling with that offense. Hopefully you can trick play them to death or get a couple scores on defense or special teams, something. And then trotting out a 4th string quarterback that's been in quarantine, hasn't practiced, he's been in meetings remotely and stuff like that, but he hasn't been around the team, working with the team on the field and stuff like that at any point like that. That seems kind of odd. And into that same vein, it's like, all right, if you do say you take your 2nd string, so you have your 1st and your 3rd string at practice every day. Take your 2nd string, have him away from the team, and only have him show up on game days. If there were something to happen with in that quarterback room, like with the 1st and the 3rd string quarterback, all right, now this guy, while again he's an NFL caliber quarterback, he's completely unprepared. That's the thing about playing quarterback. You can't just get, as we've seen, you can't just get any guy off the street and expect him to just walk into an offensive huddle and be good. Like, there's a lot of timing, a lot of chemistry, there's a lot of understanding of the offense that comes through practice and workouts and different things like that. And if you're not getting those practice reps, those communications, like, all right, on this route, when you see this, I want you to break, instead of breaking at 12, I want you to break at 10. Or in this coverage, instead of breaking at 12, I want you to break at 15. And I want you to come out of your route like this, or come out of your route like that, or like turn for the ball this way, turn for the ball that way. Like, you can't do that kind of stuff and work on that kind of stuff remotely. But at the same time, if you don't have a quarterback healthy to play a game, then really what's the point? Because then you're just going to lose anyway. So it's like I said, it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation. Because again, if you don't do something like that, you're putting your entire faith on hoping your team stays healthy that week, which is high danger, especially with a virus like this that can spread so easily. Most people, it can spread asymptomatically, even though again people are getting tested every day, stuff like that. But if you happen to like go to a teammate's house on like an after practice or like an off day or something, like one of their family members or friends maybe is at the house and they have it, now you get it. Now you pass on to your family, you pass on to other quarterbacks, different things. Like, it could be a whole mess. Again, you pass on to other teammates. Like again, it could be a whole mess. So, like I said, I understand the concept behind it and why you want to do it. Because again, the last thing any of these NFL teams is going to want is for your top quarterbacks to be out, and you have to again go. You test them Saturday. The brother tests positive. The 1st string guy. You test the 2nd string, he's positive. Test the 3rd string, he's positive. Like, then what do you do? Because they're not going to cancel the game, I promise you. The other team's definitely going to try to play. Like, look, we could get a W. Like, we're not going to cancel this one. So again, you're kind of just at the mercy of the virus at that point, and that's again not where you want to be. Especially with the diseases, again, contagious as this one. But at the same, like I said, on the same end, while I get why you'd want to do that, like, there's so many things you have to work through throughout the week and fine tune and rep and spend time after practice, spend time during practice working on separate things that you just can't do that remotely. all right, you may be in the team meetings, you may know what the game plan is, but you're not out there seeing it be implemented on the field against different defenses. So it's like one of those things where it's like the quarterback position is specifically, you can't just have people show up and like be ready to go. Like maybe like a pass rush or something. He's like, hey, look, I'm gonna line you up on the left edge, I'm gonna line you up on the right edge, I'm gonna line you up over like 3 tech, 5 tech, 1 tech, wherever you want to line you up at. And you're just gonna go rush the passer. Like that's it. Like those third down specials that basically come in on those like NASCAR like turbo packages where you have like a bunch of defensive ends on the field at the same time. Like, all right, one of those type of guys. Like, do you need him at practice every day? Yes and no, because again, you got to sometimes play the run. You can't just only be in all the time on pass rush down. Sometimes you might need to sub in and play the run. But you're going to want to know what the defensive game plan is in case you have to be in there in case a guy gets nicked up or something during the game. You want to make sure you're not just completely lost out there. But at the same time, like he's a guy that like if all you're doing is rushing the passer, like hey, just be healthy, get to the game, and if you can rush the passer, you can rush the passer. Granted, you can work on some stuff, fine-tune some stuff, and things like that. But you can watch the film on different alignments and tells that the offensive line may have or the offensive team may have, that specific tackle may have about like when it's a run, when it's a pass, when it's a run this way, when it's a run that way. What it has to do like with his sets, how he likes to position his hands. Like whether he's like a jump set or if it's like a little bit more subtle, things like that. Those are all things you can watch film on. You don't need to be out on the practice field to do those type of things. But again, quarterback, you need to be out there. Again, you need to be out there with the team, communicating. Like how are you going to call signals? How are you going to initiate audibles? How are you going to be in the huddle? Like those type of things matter. And you're not going to be able to do those things if you're with the team remotely. So yeah, just like it's a interesting concept because, again, it makes sense as to why you want to do that because the last thing you're going to want is, like I said, have a bunch of quarterbacks come down with that Rona on like a Saturday, and now your whole game plan and your whole work week, all the work you put in that week is basically shot because now no one can play. But at the same time, who you're going to pick to be that guy because you need somebody that's going to be able to, that you have to pick somebody that's going to be able to get in, that be thrown in a pinch. Like he doesn't need that much practice time, doesn't need that many reps, but he'll be ready to go in case something happens. But at the same time, if you want to put your best foot forward and make him the best quarterback possible, and that's in that scenario, you're going to need to have him repped. You need to make sure he's repped up. He's done some things with the ones and worked out with certain receivers and certain running backs in the center and different things. So you're not messing in that. So none of that's happening for the first time on Sunday. Outside of because even if at least you're at the practice, you can see the things, the way they're implemented, stuff like that. Like, again, you could probably, they could have you, zoomed in or whatever, and they can show you the stuff on the field, but it's not the same. It's just not the same. And, also, I was thinking, this is something you'd want to do in other positions. Like I said, maybe pass rusher, maybe not. But if you're talking about, defensive line, or, so we're talking about offensive line, hey, do you want to make sure your swing tackle's good? Because again, if you have an outbreak, and then they were being talking about the quarterback room, but if you have an outbreak in any room, you're kind of screwed. Especially if you get a one in the lineman or the defensive lineman, where linemen you dress about 8 to 10, depending on the game and depending on how many good ones you have. You're dressing you're only dressing 2, max 3 quarterbacks a week. You're going to dress 8, 9 linemen most weeks. So again, you have to have backups. It's a couple different positions. You can't just have one backup for every position. It's not going to work. Do you have your swing tackle or your backup guard or something quarantined so that you don't run the risk of having all your starters and all your backups be COVID positive? Now again, quarterback, you can figure something out. You can't figure out something with the line if you don't got no linemen. Who you going to have receivers? It's not going to work. It's just not going to work. And again, that's not something that they talked about or discussed, but it's something that I was thinking. I'm all right, this quarterback thing, it makes sense. I get it. Why would you not do this for other positions or think about doing this for other positions at least? Because, again, they're just as much at risk of catching disease as the quarterbacks, and they're also just as important in terms of, if your center's out, or your right or left tackle, or both of your right and left tackle are out. That's a big deal if they both catch that Rona. That's not something small. That's a big situation. something like that matters if like, again, they're not there during the game, especially when these backups will not have gotten any practice. It's a big deal if your center's out. It's a big deal if maybe your middle linebacker's out. He's the only guy that really calls the defense for your team. Like, obviously, they have a backup for him because you have to. But if he's the only guy calling defense in practice, stuff like that, he's the only one that got the mic in the only one that got the mic in the helmet in practice. And the big deal if your starting secondary is out. Like, again, your two corners and your two safeties are out. That's a big deal because now you got guys that are playing together that may not be used to playing together, so they might not be really able to relay certain calls. They might not be on the same page when it comes to different coverages, things like that. These are things that are all important. So I understand the quarantine the quarterback because that's the biggest position that's the most important. But I mean, why would you stop there? Why would I do this at other positions? Because again, then the outbreak can happen in the quarterback room just like can happen in any other room. The only room I probably wouldn't do this is like running back because those are the most easily replaceable. So. You just hope nobody catches you just hope your whole running back room doesn't catch the runner because obviously you're going to need somebody back there to do it. But that is probably going to be the easiest group to find somebody to fill in. Because if you just got a guy that knows the plays well enough and can run through an open hole and make some guys miss, you'll be all right. Similar thing to receiver. If you got a guy that can catch, get open a little bit, and again, it's going to be the time is going to be off, the chemistry is going to be off the quarterback, but hey, if the guy's fast, let's have him run a lot of deep routes, a lot of overs, a lot of drags, things like that, some slants. You can work through that. So you can't work through having a brand new starting five up front. Like, that's just not going to work. But it's possible. So it'll be interesting to see if teams do, how many teams utilize this quarantine quarterback or quarantine whatever position. Because it's going to be of importance to make sure you have all your bases covered to make sure that you're not caught out there before a Sunday game or Monday night or Thursday, whenever you're playing that week. It's just going to be important. It's going to be imperative because, like I said, with the last segment, teams that handle that Rona and handle injury, the best may be the teams that end up being there at the end, and they may not necessarily be the best team. But hey, this is an important aspect of is navigating through this pandemic. So teams are going to have to, that's an added variable, teams are going to have to work through. And we'll see how they'll do it whenever, like I said, once these games get started for real. In about a month. Yeah, in about a month. And before we get out of here, I wanted to go on to our last segment, and that's going to be Bucks or the field. So I'll discuss both sides of it, and then I'll tell you who I would take out of those two based on, again, what I've seen so far in Orlando. Because, again, the early part of the season does matter, but this Orlando part, it's a brand new season, baby. Brand new. A lot of uncertainty, a lot of things that could happen that might not have happened in the original season. So we got to discuss all that, and we got to see, has people's perception of the Bucks changed a little bit based on the way they played so far? Again, this could change in the next 3 games, but so far in Orlando, has the public perception changed on the Bucks? It's not impossible. So we'll discuss all of that right after the break. So stay right there.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and One Championship. We got the fights covered. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Again on the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by GSMC Podcast Network. So, Bucks versus the field. Now, I mean, I understand that not everybody's a betting person. You might not understand exactly what that means. Basically, what I'm saying is, if you were a betting person, you were to put money down, would you be willing to put it down on the Bucks to win the Eastern Conference outright? Not talking about the NBA championship, just talking about the East. Win their conference outright. Or would you be willing to take any other person or any other team in the playoff field, again, outside the Bucks? Who you think is going to make it out the East? And I think there's a conversation to be had at this point. Now, if you're going to have this conversation in like March, I think the conversation will go a lot differently. But that's just me personally. I would say like coming into March, I'm trying to think like, let me see where they were at right when obviously, I mean, they had the best record in the league, but like March, they had won. I mean, they just also like, oh no, they were actually looking very shaky. This is interesting. So in March, they went 2-4. Their 2 wins being against the Hornets, and the Pacers. Quality win, not by 19. But they lost to the Heat. Lost to the Lakers, I remember that. Lost to the Suns. And lost to the Nuggets. All before Rona shut everything down. So the Bucks have been looking a little shaky for some months now. Like, this isn't necessarily anything new. You could argue. I mean, it's new mainly because the Bucks had been playing so well throughout the season, but it's not new when you look at it in terms of the fact that heading into the shutdown, the Bucks had been playing somewhat poorly. And I'm trying to think, let me even look back into the end of February, see if it extended that far. No. Okay, no, they were playing well at the end of February. Yeah, they had routed off a nice 5-game winning streak at the end of February. Beat the Pistons, Sixers handedly. Beat the Wizards in overtime. That's a little shaky. Beat the Raptors handedly and remember they smacked the Thunder by like 50. That was really uncalled for. I don't know why. I don't know what the Thunder did to them that game. I remember I was out in the bar. I think it was the next to last night. I was out. I think I went out that Saturday, and then obviously I haven't been out since. And yeah, I just remember watching that, and I was like, "Ooh, okay, let's do literally anything else," because this game is not fun. I think it was on ESPN too. It was really disgusting. But yeah, so like I said, they're 2-4, and then in the restart, they beat the Celtics first game. All right, looking good. Everything's looking good. And then now they lost to the Rockets, and then they lost to the Nets, and then they got the Heat on Thursday. See how that goes. And they still got to play the Raptors again next Monday. I mean, they play the Mavs, Wizards, and Grizzlies in the other 3 games. So those aren't necessarily up to the caliber of a team that the Bucks should be. But again, when you lose to the Nets, all bets are off at this point. Like, we can't just assume you're going to win every game from here on out. Like, you lost to the Nets, and not even, like, again, not a good Nets team. Not the Nets with Kyrie, with KD, not even the Nets with Karras, Joe Harris, and Jared Allen. You lost to the Nets without, again, if you include Spencer and DeAndre, Wilson Chandler's a little shaky on the list. But you're talking about a Nets team that is without probably, depending on if Joe Harris comes back, probably about 6 to 8 rotation players from that team next year. Guys that they signed off the street, guys that weren't even on the roster. That this time, I mean, 4 months ago when the season ended, that's what they lost to. With, again, did they rest the Middleton and like most of their stars in the second half? Yes, but they were still losing when the starters played in the first half. So it's not like they were up and they blew the lead. Like, no, they gave up 40 points in the first quarter to the Nets. 40. Gave up 73 points and a half to this Nets team. Borderline G League. Step above. Guys like Garrett Temple aren't G League players. Jamal Crawford played a little bit, aren't G League players. Well, isn't a G League player. I'm trying to think who else. Tyler Johnson at this point probably isn't a G League player, but most of those other guys, like the Kurukses and the Chinozas and the TLCs and the Mooses and I think who else got some minutes for them in this game that any of us maybe have heard of before. Lance Thomas. Okay, he's probably not a G League guy, but what was it? Dante Hall, the guy that got into it a little bit with Giannis. Was it Jeremiah Martin? Didn't know who that guy was before today. Justin Anderson, Musa. Like, this is a borderline G League team with a couple old vets in there. And that's what the Bucks lost to. And like I said, if you go back as late as if you go back to pre-COVID in March, they were having a shaky start to the month. So now if you add those two together, they're 3-6 in their last 9 games. And then you got teams like the Raptors looking pretty good. 2 very, very quality wins down here in Atlanta so far. I said Atlanta. Down here in Atlanta I said Atlanta again. Wow. Down here in Orlando so far, with wins over the Lakers and the Heat. You got the Heat, who they lost a close game to the Raptors that they could have easily won. Then they beat the Celtics, and they stomped the Nuggets, 2 very good teams. And then that's who they see Thursday. And you got the Celtics, who again lost a competitive game to the Heat, and then beat the Blazers, who again aren't bad, but they were up big on that game. They ended up kind of blowing the lead in the second half, but they were up big. So when you're looking at the top teams in the East, and that again doesn't even factor in the Sixers, who again, if they could just figure some things out, they were able to get the win. Even though that was a game, the Spurs should have won that game too. The Sixers should be 0-2. How they come off that game and your boy Ben Simmons comes out, gets 8 points and fouls out. Beyond me, but they won, so I can't get mad at that. I think Tobias played well in that game as well, and so they won. Like again, I can't be too mad at a team for winning because word to Herm Edwards, you play to win the game. So it doesn't matter that they almost lost. They won. And that's what's really important. Shake Milton again bounced back. Yeah, Tobias Harris was good. 25 on 10 of 17, three threes. Embiid put up 27-9. Josh Richardson 5-15 but had 19. It was Korkmaz had 12 off the bench. Horford wasn't a complete disaster, just plus 17. Best on the team. So so I'm saying the Sixers kind of turn things around. Maybe they'll figure something out. The Pacers. P.J. Warren's going to play like the best player in the league for the entirety of Orlando. They could be an easy team. They're not going to be an easy team to beat. So it's just like who would you go with right now if you were a betting man or woman? Kind of, at least on my timeline, a lot of men are the ones doing the bet, but I imagine women place bets as well. They're into sports betting. I know I've seen some voices or people or faces of sports betting, different sports betting accounts and different things are women. So, at the end of the day, people like to make money. So I'm not. I don't think that's. I feel like that's pretty gender neutral in terms of people wanting to make money. So So if you're a betting person out there, who do you put your money on? And based on what I've seen so far, I gotta go with the field. Only because, well, not only, but because the field faces teams that match up well with the Bucks. The Raptors match up well with the Bucks, in my opinion. The Heat match up well with the Bucks, in my opinion. The Celtics could match up well, but again, their whole big man situation, they're very shaky to me. They got to work on that. Even the Sixers, in theory, could match up with the Bucks. They got a guy in Ben Simmons that should be able to guard Giannis. But again, they both face similar deficiencies where they both can't shoot, and it's going to and that's going to make offense harder for both their teams come playoff time. So again, and obviously we're not talking about the Nets or the Magic, though. Again, the Nets beat them today. So I'm saying they can get beat by the Nets, and they can get beat by the Suns pre-hot streak in the bubble. Hey, maybe we're on to something here. And like I'm saying, even in those games, their defense, who again is one of the better defenses in the league, has not looked like one of the better defenses in the league. They've given up 120 and 119 so far in the bubble. I mean, well, in their first two games, they gave up 112 against the Celtics. And then pre-COVID, they gave up 113 to the Lakers, 140 to the Suns, and 109 to the Nuggets. They gave up 47 points in the first quarter. I gotta see, was this like a back-to-back? How did this happen? No, they had the night off. I mean, this is right after Lakers lost. So maybe they were still kind of reeling from that. And I guess they were playing a back-to-back. They played Nuggets on Monday. Still caught that L in that game, too. And Chris Middleton played well. Shout out to him. Oh, Giannis didn't play against the Suns. But still, that's not a good enough excuse. Yeah, you get 28 out of Eric Bledsoe, you're supposed to win that game. I don't care what happened. And Chris Middleton on 39. Like, that makes up for Giannis a little bit. You tell me, because Giannis didn't play, Aaron Baines had to go for 24, Mikal Bridges had to go for 21, Ricky Rubio had to go for 25. Like that, Ayton didn't even play. He was out with a sprained ankle. So again, both teams are missing somebody. And yeah, they gave up 140 in regulation. This game didn't even go to overtime. They just gave up 140 just off the muscle. Gave up 140. Gave up almost 80 and a half. 77 in the first half. Absurd. So yeah, again, I'm not going to sit here and say the Bucks aren't the best team in the East currently, but when we talking about the playoffs, like yes, we're talking about the playoffs. I don't know if I can trust them. I don't know how hardly I can trust them. That's crazy because, again, they have the back-to-back MVP, most likely, again, barring some obviously circumstance, even though the Lakers happen to have a guy that's going to finish probably second or third in the MVP voting, while also having that person not be arguably the best player even on their own team. It's up for debate. I know I saw a graphic today, and I looked it up, and it's more or less true, depending on the different statistics you look at, but I think it was the Anthony Davis leads like the Lakers in like 13 different categories. Whether it's like points, rebounds, blocks, steals, like plus minus, like box score plus minus, like a different random things. Like Anthony Davis is the leading Laker in a lot of statistics, and yet his teammate is the one that's in the MVP vote. And again, Brown's averaging career in assists, leading the league in assists. So again, he's not having a bad year, but it's just crazy that you could argue Anthony Davis is having a better year than him, and he's not even going to be maybe even top 5 in MVP voting. He's having a better season than LeBron on both ends of the floor. Again, maybe not assists, but like points, rebounds, blocks, steals, different things like that. Like you can make a case that he could be Defensive Player of the Year. You really could. But it's just funny. But yes, they got back-to-back MVP. They got the coach's pick for Coach of the Year again, because I'm pretty sure Bud was Coach of the Year last year. Him and Billy Donovan were tied in that coach's poll. Even though Nick Nurse was 1 vote off or 1 point off, whichever one it was from it being a 3-way tie. So they got a back-to-back potential, or at least a couple-time Coach of the Year. Got the MVP. Got another All-Star in Chris Middleton, and there's a decent group of people, myself included, that don't think they're going to make it out the East. So again, I just got to see it first. At least again, then I got to see. I hope I have the right to change my tune if they look better heading into the playoffs. Right now, based off the basketball I've seen in Orlando, the Field's probably going to be the safe bet. Honestly, because again, when you got to count on. You got to count on, in the playoffs, you got to count on different guys to step up and seize that moment. And again, I don't think they're, like maybe a Dante DiVincenzo is going to be that guy that seizes the moment. Maybe Eric Bledsoe will play well in the playoffs more consistently for once. Maybe Middleton this will be his like real coming out party kind of thing come playoff time. It's all possible. But like when you're talking about the Raptors, I've seen it. I saw Pascal Siakam be the best player in a couple finals games. I saw the Fred VanVleet shoot the lights out in the conference finals and in the NBA finals. I saw Kyle Lowry be the best player in Game 6 of a closeout game on an opposing team's floor. Right, then, Clay went out and KD was out, all this other stuff. But yeah, I've seen it. I've seen Serge have big games in the playoffs. I've seen Marcus have big games in the playoffs. OG was out most of last year, but I mean, he played well in the playoffs the 2 years ago, the last DeMar year. Like I've seen Norman Powell get big, make big shots for them in the playoffs. I've seen all this stuff. I've seen Nick Nurse make adjustments and coach. I don't want to say coach circles around people, because that seems a bit excessive. But I've seen him make good adjustments within the game, and like again, they were guarding Kawhi one way. I mean, guarding Giannis one way. They're like, nope, this isn't going to work. We're going to do this. Switch it up. It worked. They were doing like, all right, we need to. Once Clay was out, or we need to go to box and one. And cool, it worked. Like again, I've seen, and also as I said, and I talked about in the last episode, like just watch the Raptors play defense. It's impressive. Most nights. Again, I'm not going to say they because every team has a bad game, but just like the way they move in sync, and everyone seems to go to the right place. And all right, you take this guy, the ball goes here. I'll take this guy, you take him. We switch, we rotate. We win, like they're never really out of position. It's impressive. It really is. So yeah, I just think I gotta take the field right now. Again, I just like any of us have the right to change my opinion if presented with new information. Based on the information I have right now, I think the field, whether it be the Raptors, Celtics, Heat, even the Sixers, if they figure some things out, are a safer bet than just betting on the Bucks. Because based on what I've seen, the Bucks leave a little to be desired. So hopefully they get it turned around come playoff time, but I don't know. I gotta see something. I gotta see it, because I'm not. Again, they've had a great year, all this stuff, but they had a great year last year, and we saw what happened. They got ran off the floor the last 4 games. And we've already seen that before. We got to see. All right, can the Bucks now take that next step? Because they got to the playoffs. Got to the conference finals. Cool. What's next? Getting to the conference finals again and losing isn't enough for me. It shouldn't be enough for them either. And I think that may be what the collision course they have, especially if they run into that Raptors team again. I just have more confidence in the Raptors right now. Again, see what happens in a couple weeks. But right now, I just have a little bit more confidence in the Raptors. And also, I know Spoelstra with the Heat. He's a championship-winning coach. I know he's going to have his guys ready. I know he will. I know he'll be willing to make adjustments, do different things, try different things, tinker with rotations and matchups and different things. I know because I've seen him do it before. I haven't seen Bud do it, and I haven't seen Giannis do it. It's just fair. Again, Jimmy Butler and stuff, they haven't. No one on the Heat has done it personally, but I've seen Spoelstra do it. So that's enough for me to be like, all right, I can have faith in this team. I know the coach is not going to crack under the pressure. Even if the players might, the coach isn't. So, this is what it is. Again, we're all welcome to our own opinion. You may disagree with me. By all means, feel free to reach out. Let me know why I'm wrong, why the Bucks are going to get to the finals and they're going to win it all. Please, let me know. I'd be willing to have that discussion with you. Willing to discuss what you think of the quarantine quarterback situation. Whether you think a team should do it, shouldn't do it. If they should do it for just a quarterback, do it for other positions. I mean, I'm willing to discuss all of it. And tell me how you like the bubble basketball, the Disney Invitational, as I like to call it. Such a great name. How you liked it so far. What you've seen, what you've been impressed by, what you've been unimpressed by. Teams you're surprised by. Players you're surprised by, all that stuff. I'd love to discuss it with you guys, and we can do that anywhere on social media. So Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Like I said, we can talk, chat, we can debate, we can discuss. If you haven't already, which you should, but if you haven't, and you like what you've heard today, like you've heard in past episodes here on the podcast, make sure you subscribe. Help make sure you never miss an episode. Help make sure you're always on top of when we drop our latest stuff. And also, if you like what you've heard today, write us a nice review. Leave us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to your podcast. It'll be very appreciated. It'll let us know you really enjoy and also allow us to improve. If there's topics you want us to discuss, or things we could work on, different things like that, again, feel free to put that in your review. But that'll do it for me here today on the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by GSMC Podcast Network. Well, thank you guys, as always, for listening. Before I get out of here, give a shout out to the essential workers that have, again, done a lot of the heavy lifting, both literally and figuratively, during this pandemic. So first responders, EMTs, nurses, doctors, firefighters, delivery drivers, post office workers especially. I know what y'all going through. Well, I don't know personally, but I've read stories about what you guys are going through in terms of like the lack of resources and some of the scheduling conflicts and changes and what you're allowed to do and what not allowed to do. It's a whole mess. Even though I could get into it, but again, it's a sports podcast. Not trying to get into it too much with everything that's going on there. But yeah, Amazon, UPS, FedEx drivers. Again, I've utilized Amazon especially. I know Jeff Bezos is not the greatest person. Amazon's an elite service. I feel bad saying that, but I mean, it gets stuff to me relatively. Most of the time, I got Amazon Prime, as I mean, of course, and it gets to me within 2 days. I don't even need this stuff that fast, but it's nice to have it quicker. Generally, like even during the pandemic, a lot of stuff was still getting to me, and like I know I've heard some stories about people having stuff delivered through the post office, have to wait weeks, maybe even a month to get some stuff. That really happens with Amazon. And like I said, Jeff Bezos, terrible person. Shout out to his wife though; she was out here donating to HBCUs and giving to like Black Lives Matter organizations, things like that. Shout out to her, using that divorce money for good. Definitely appreciate that. She's clearly a better of the two. But hey, Amazon, great service. But again, shout out to all you delivery drivers. Shout out to the retail workers, grocery store workers. Got to deal with the people on a regular basis. Having worked in the movie theater, I know people can be rough, especially when you tell them what they can and can't do. Americans don't like to hear that. Too tough. So shout out to you guys having to deal with that. If you're working in a bar, working in a restaurant now, shout out to you. I know it's been rough for you throughout this pandemic. Hopefully, wherever you're at, your restaurant and bar is still open. They haven't had to shut it back down due to that Rona. You're in there. People are tipping you nicely. If you go, again, tip if they, the people live off the tips. They can work for a while. If you can afford to, again, I'm not going to count anyone's pockets and spend anyone's money for them, but if you can afford to, give them a nice tip. I guarantee you it'll be appreciated by these people that, again, have had to deal with different things. We've all had to deal with different things throughout this pandemic, so I don't want to put it on like, these guys are the only ones that have to deal with stuff. But, again, I imagine this helped make somebody's day. I guarantee you they will appreciate it. And also, wear a mask. It's that simple. We wear a mask, the virus has nowhere to go. It'll hopefully dwindle down, and then we can go back to not normal life, because that's never going to happen, but something closer to where we can be out and about in public more frequently. So I would still be masked up, but you can at least be out and about more frequently. It's going to be nice when we can do that again. Can't do that yet, but hopefully we will sometime next year, ? I don't know. Who knows when this pandemic's going to be over, honestly, at this point. But yeah, that'll do it for me here today. I've been Chris Blades. That has been my time. And until next time, peace out.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.